Hello there everybody, how's it going? Well, here we are again, at the end of the year 2025, ready to talk about all of the great games that came out. This year actually reminded me a lot of 2023, which I called both the worst and best year in gaming. I'd probably label 2025 similarly. Although many great games did come out, most of them were indie titles that were played and craved because of the deep dissatisfaction people have with the AAA side of the industry. Everything's getting too expensive, and the games being featured aren't even worth the expense lately, which left the independent developers with the opportunity to mop the floor with them as they put out some of the best games in years at the fraction of the price with no strings attached. And when you decide to criticize any of these AAA failings, it's instant drama online, when no one can say anything on the internet without accusing everyone of war crimes for having a difference of opinion, or simply pointing out the facts of a given issue. But hey, what else is new? Every single year I complain about the same damn thing and it doesn't seem to be getting any better, so I'm gonna try something different today. I'm gonna practice what I preach and just focus on talking about all the games I enjoyed this year. With that said, I actually didn't have the opportunity to play that many games this year. My focus in life has been more on my job and other creative endeavors outside of gaming. And when I am gaming, I've been finding myself playing older games as opposed to newer stuff. In fact, I just recently discovered retro achievements, which gave me a great excuse to play through a ton of nostalgic titles for me. For example, I've been playing through all of the PS2 Ratchet & Clank games lately, and it's been super fun chasing after all the achievements for those. So yeah, this top 10 list might be a bit unusual from the rest, but I do have a fair amount of titles that I like to talk about, based on what games were the most fun for me personally, as opposed to what was popular or what I felt needed to be on the list, whether by obligation or pressure from other people. I just tried to be true to myself on this one, which is what I already do anyway, but, reminders, you can never have enough of them. But before that, let's do the honorable mentions. These are just games that didn't make the list, but I think are interesting enough that they deserve to be shouted out. If you ever find yourself wanting to play something, but you can't decide on what, then this might be a good place to start. These aren't even necessarily games that I played a whole lot, it's just stuff that I've seen reviews of, I've seen playthroughs of, I've seen a lot of good stuff about it, and of course, the vast majority is stuff that I did play myself. But just like, hey, here's some cool stuff, you might be interested, the highlights of the year, So, let's go. For honorable mentions, we have Beyond Citadel, Arc Raiders, Look Outside, Once Upon a Katamari, Ball Pit, or Ball X Pit, however you want to say it, Blood Thief, V-Racer Hoverbike, Cruel, Oblivion Remastered, Time Flies, Silent Hill F, Slime Rancher 2, Final Fantasy Tactics: The Ivalice Chronicles, Donkey Kong Bonanza, SMT Raido Remastered, Split Fiction, Blueprints, Schedule 1, Freedom Wars Remastered, Doom: The Dark Ages, Dynasty Warriors Origins, Ender Magnolia Bloom in the Mist, Ninja Gaiden 2 Black, Ninja Gaiden 4, Girls Frontline 2 Exilium, Monster Hunter Wilds, Like a Dragon, Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, Hyper Light Breaker, What the Clash, Rift of the Necrodancer, Trails Through Daybreak 2, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 and 4 Remake, Suikoden 1 and 2 Remasters, Tokyo Extreme Racer, Atelier Yumiya, and a long-ass title that I can't be bothered to say, Fast Fusion, Ys vs. Trails in the Sky Alternative Saga, The Outer Worlds 2, Xenoblade X Definitive Edition, Octopath Traveler 0, Fatal Fury City of the Wolves, Phantom Breaker Battlegrounds Ultimate, Lunar Remastered Collection, Capcom Fighting Collection 2, Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma, Space Invaders Infinity Gene Evolve, Elden Ring Night Rain, The Wandering Village, Wu Chang Fallen Feathers, Vendetta Forever, and Fate Hollow Atraxia. Now that we're done with honorable mentions, let's move on to a different segment that I like to call games that could have made the list, but didn't. The first one is Unbeatable. Ever since I saw the first trailer for this game, I was excited to get it in my hands. It almost felt like a Scott Pilgrim-style rhythm game in the style of Muse Dash. And after a ton of waiting, it finally came out in December, and unfortunately I didn't really like it as much as I thought I would. I think the story and the dialogue is kind of cringe and boring and sort of predictable. The soundtrack I found to be really disappointing, and there's a ton of really annoying bugs at launch that were bothersome enough that I eventually shut the game off and waited for updates. I'm still not really clear if the characters constantly interrupting each other is a bug or that's intentionally how it's supposed to be, but either way, it's annoying and I just had enough of it. I finished the first chapter and I was like, I'm gonna wait for this to get better. I came out of it feeling really sad because I really wanted to like this game. I mean, the game looks beautiful and not all of the music is terrible or anything. I mean, there is good music in there and there's a lot of potential in this, but I just came out the other end feeling pretty flaccid. However, there's still part of me that has faith that this game will improve over time. As I said, it has potential. Most of the problems I have with it are fixable, so I look forward to revisiting this game in about a year or two, and possibly changing my opinion on it, but for now, I have kind of a hard time recommending it. The next game I wanted to talk about a little bit was Death Stranding 2. And yes, before you ask, yeah, this game did come out this year, and it is very good, so far. I wasn't able to play enough of it to be able to confidently say that it's one of my games of the year. I feel the need to say that because the game did come out and was talked about for what I felt was like a week, and then it suddenly just disappeared from the zeitgeist. Like, nobody ever talked about this game ever again right after it came out, and I don't know why. Maybe I'm just not active in the right communities, but I have not heard anybody talk about this game at all, which sucks, because Death Stranding 2 is, from what I've been able to play so far, I say it's pretty on par with the first one, and in many places, it surpasses it. Hideo Kojima really knocks it out of the park again with his usual style of bizarre but extremely memorable style of storytelling. I think you should already know what to expect when buying a game with Kojima's name on the box, but for some people, it's not their vibe, and they think it's vague, artsy, pretentious walking simulator Hollywood cronyism nonsense. Meanwhile, others think that it's fascinating and incredibly unique from anything else out there, and is also fun in its own way. Now, if you ask for my opinion, I'm somewhere in the middle. I kind of agree with both sides of that discussion. Yeah, a lot of it is kind of pretentious and artsy, but also it has a charm that makes me want to keep playing, you know? I feel like you don't really need to have Hollywood celebrities in this, but also, you know, Hideo Kojima's the only one that does it, which kind of adds to his uniqueness. Yeah, you know, I can kind of see both sides of that argument. But in any case, I've been enjoying myself so far. I mean, I really like Death Stranding 1, and with this game, it's pretty much that but more. And I still have a long way to go before I form a more educated opinion about this sequel specifically, so I'm just gonna leave it off the list for now. I need more time to play it. The next game I wanted to talk about is Digimon Story Time Stranger. I heard great things about it and I wanted to play it, but I never really found the time to do so. In an era where basically everyone that I know is no longer on speaking terms with the Pokemon franchise, myself included, I am grateful that there are other developers out there that are willing to compete and putting the extra effort with their own monster catching games. Similar to Dragon Quest and Shin Megami Tensei and even other smaller indie titles like Temtem and Disc Creatures and stuff like that, Digimon is another one of those, and in fact it's probably, alongside Pokemon, one of the more popular ones of the monster catching type. And in this case, Digimon Time Stranger is a great example of what Pokemon could evolve into, but it doesn't, because of the complacency that comes with being at the top of the monster catching food chain, right? They're Nintendo, they're at the top, everybody buys their games no matter what, at whatever price that they put it in, so why would they ever put in the effort to improve, right? Well, unfortunately, this Digimon game is not on my list, because I've only seen playthroughs of it, and I've heard a lot of people talk about it, but I haven't actually played it myself with my own two hands. But I at least wanted to acknowledge this game in the wake of my deep dissatisfaction with Pokemon right now. Hopefully, by highlighting other competitors, can Game Freak get their ass in gear and actually make better games. And the last game I wanted to talk about for this segment was Escape from Duckov. A ton of people have been screaming up and down about how good this game is. Similar to Silksong, it's a small indie game that came out for only $20, or I think $25, I forget. It's super cheap is the point. You know, people are sick to death of the original like Escape from Tarkov game and then having other games cost $70 to $80, and so the game being so cheap is definitely a big attractor, and all of the hype around it, you know, it made me want to impulsively buy the game and give it a shot. And after a few hours with it, man, like, I'm sorry to say, but I simply couldn't vibe with it. I can definitely see why people would love it, but it's just not for me. This kind of game is really not my style. I've never really liked these kinds of, like, super hardcore survival games where you have, like, really limited ammo, you have a hunger meter and a thirst meter, the limited inventory, and, like, this game has, like, a restricted cone of vision where any enemy is totally invisible to you unless you're looking directly at it, and so I have these moments where I just get killed seemingly out of nowhere. Obviously, it's not out of nowhere. There's enemies around me, but like it's kind of tough to see because of the limited vision and stuff. As soon as I find myself looking at a gun that has the entire screen filled with stat numbers like it's an Excel spreadsheet, my eyes just kind of glaze over, and playing just feels like a drag more than a fun time. And I know this is a hot take because everybody loves this game. I mean, even cute VTuber anime girls that have never held a game controller in their life are playing this game, they're loving it, and beating it all the way to the end. So, meanwhile, I am here having a freaking DSP moment where I can't even get through the first few hours without getting frustrated, getting bored, blaming the game, and just giving up. I know I'm in the minority here, and I tried my best to, get it, quote-unquote, but the experience hasn't really clicked with me yet. But hey, maybe someday it will, and I'll look back on this video feeling like a total idiot for not understanding why people love this game so much. I haven't been enjoying myself so far, but I am definitely open to giving it more opportunities in the future. Awesome. Alright, so now that we got that out of the way, we can talk about the list proper. Here are all of my favorite games from 2025. Starting with my first game of the year, which is Lumines Arise. I have been a big fan of Lumines since the PSP days. I've played every single installment and even played the Tetris Effect with how similar it was to Lumines. Now, speaking of the Tetris Effect, Enhanced Games, the developers, basically took that same system from the Tetris Effect and just applied it to Lumines with this new game. And it works spectacularly well. Dare I say, it makes more sense to apply this to Lumines than to Tetris Effect. Playing Lumines Arise was a delicious visual and audio banquet that left me with a big stupid grin on my face when I finished playing. It didn't take too long to beat, but the moment that I finished it, I just wanted to go again. It was like a great roller coaster ride that you ride multiple times. If you've played Lumines before, you know exactly what this is, right? You stack up blocks and try to form squares of the same color, while a vertical line scrolls past the screen to make them disappear. The more squares you can create before the line gets to you, the more points you get. That's literally it. But what makes Lumines so interesting is the music and the visuals that accompany that activity. Every movement you make contributes to the music, and as you progress eliminating blocks, the environment might even change and the song itself will move on to a different segment. The blocks themselves will also change into whatever level you're playing, so at first the blocks just kind of change color, but eventually they'll change into a ton of different things like fruits and cars and different shaped spheres and a load of other things. Combine all of this with virtual reality support, and you'll have an incredible time taking in all the graphics flying at your face like it's a 3D movie while playing a cool puzzle game. Dare I say, it is almost hypnotic how everything flows so well into each other, right? After a certain point, you kind of just lose yourself and you play the game for a lot longer than you were expecting. And by you, I mean me. For anyone that has played the Tetris Effect, you'll find a lot of the same mechanics here too, and the similar online modes to play as well. I think those are good excuses for you to keep on playing the same levels over and over again, since there are, I think, around like 30-something levels that you can get through in just a couple of hours. But that's how all the Lumines games have always been, short, but hypnotic and addicting and incredibly satisfying to play, and all those online modes that have like community goals, and obviously you have versus matches and all that stuff. That's the kind of stuff that keeps you coming back and playing a bit more consistently. And of course, there's nothing saying that you can't, leave the game for a little while and come back and be wowed by the visuals again. As for me, I've been trying to get in there and play as much as I can because I just love looking at this game and listening to it. It's a feast for the eyes and ears. I highly recommend it. Alright, my second game of the year is Sonic Racing CrossWorlds. So, I have always been a really big fan of Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing Transformed. I've been playing that game since it was on PlayStation Vita, and then I played it on PC, and I've always had a great time with it. And so, when I found out that Sonic Racing CrossWorlds was basically just that, but more, with transforming vehicles and everything, I was super into it. I was really looking forward to this new game. Especially with all those crazy crossover character reveals, right? Like Hatsune Miku's in this game, and Minecraft Steve, SpongeBob is in this game, so, they're kind of trying like a Smash Brothers thing with this, and so that was certainly an attractor as well. And of course, the big elephant in the room is Mario Kart World, right? That Mario Kart game was pretty disappointing for a lot of people, and so it kind of left a racing game void inside a lot of people that hopefully Sonic Racing CrossWorlds could fill. And it did fill that void for me. Just like a lot of people out there, I wasn't really feeling the more Forza style, like the more open world aspect of racing in the newest Mario Kart game, and I was desiring more regular tracks to play. And so because Mario Kart World dropped the ball so hard in a bunch of different aspects, Sonic succeeded by basically doing nothing, other than just being a normal and perfectly solid racing game. All the tracks are fun. I mean, I like the portal mechanic where you can shift from one track to the other. I like all the characters that are involved. I like that there's little dialogue between them and that you always have a rival that you gotta beat. And of course, I really love the transforming vehicles. That's one of the primary things that made me love the previous game, All-Star Racing's Transformed. There's really not much else I can say other than I just really liked it. As I said before, this is a fairly normal racing game that doesn't do much to shake up the formula or push the envelope. But I don't think every game has to do that to be good, and Sonic Racing CrossWorlds is a good example of that. And speaking of racing games that confidently stay true to themselves, let's talk about the next game of the year, which is Kirby Air Riders. I never had any doubt that this game would at least be as good as the original GameCube game, especially with Masahiro Sakurai himself directing the whole thing. But I'm still very happy to say that Kirby Air Riders is even better than the original. And as I mentioned with Sonic Racing, all I had to do was to simply add more to what was already there and just be true to itself. This game is definitely a love letter to all of those people that played the original, but it also does a pretty good job at bringing new players in, with all of the same modes that you have come to expect, including a new city trial map and a new road trip mode that stands as kind of like a story mode with cutscenes and all that stuff. And that one is cool because that mode is sort of like a compilation of all of the other modes in the game, so that's a really good introduction. If you want just a little taste of everything that the game has to offer, that road trip mode is actually really good. For anyone that remembers the very unique way that the original Kirby Air Rider controls, all of that is still intact here. For some people that might be bad news, for me that's good news. I've always loved the way the Kirby Air Rider controls. As Sakurai says, unfortunately there is one more button that was added as opposed to just the one. I think is the Y button or the B button, I forget. It's the one button that you use for unique attacks that every character has, so even then the button isn't really used super often. Oh yeah, by the way, there's a ton of new characters. You don't just play as different colored Kirbys now. Now you can play as DDD and Meta Knight and a whole bunch of other dudes. All of them can use copy abilities as well, which is awesome, and then you can have them wear hats. You can decorate your own machine, which leads to some very obvious but still very fun results online. I could go on and on about all the new things that the game has, but at its core, it is still Kirby Air Ride. It's just faster, it looks way prettier, and it's a lot more chaotic than last time. Big emphasis on the chaotic part, since now the game has proper online support, so you can have like 4 people or even 8 or 16 players blasting each other with explosions constantly during city trial and races. For anyone that thinks this game is just Mario Kart with Kirby characters, well, you're in for something much more unique and interesting. Again, for better or for worse, because some people just can't vibe with the controls and stuff. I personally love it, but you will definitely get a unique experience that pays a lot of attention to detail and has a lot of very amazing Smash Brothers-esque things within it. You know, this is a Sakurai game after all. And hey, what can I say? I mean, I had a lot of fun with the original GameCube game, and this is just that, but more of it. It's an extremely fun time. And I am glad that I borrowed someone else's Switch 2 to be able to play it for a long time. So yeah, I don't have a Switch 2. I had to borrow someone else's Switch 2 to be able to play this game. But, you know, the amount of time that I had with it, man, it was unforgettable. I am tempted, like, should I get a Switch 2 just to play this? Maybe not. I'll wait for more games to pile up. But Kirby Air Riders is definitely going to be one of those games that I buy right away as soon as I get my own Switch 2. Alright, so my next game of the year is Fantasy Life I, The Girl Who Steals Time. It's a pretty chill experience overall. It's very simple and not as good as the 3DS games that came before it, but still a visually pleasing and very fun time that I had difficulties putting down. For most of this year, this game was my comfort food. It was my turn my brain off and just chill kind of game. It was my put on a podcast and not really think much of anything kind of game. It was difficult to take it seriously anyway, you know, even if I did want to pay a whole lot of attention, considering that the story is about at the same level as like a children's cartoon or like a Saturday morning cartoon kind of thing. It's super simple, and every character is extremely innocent and childish, you know, in a good way. Even the villain characters feel more like little kids pulling pranks on people as opposed to anything that's like legitimately bad or evil or anything like that. everything is done super playfully, right? I'm not saying that any of this is a bad thing. You know, I am not the kind of guy to be like, I only play games for super cool, mature adults. Like, nah, you know, sometimes I like this kind of vibe as well, you know? It can be pretty charming in a lot of points, you know, seeing this kind of vibe. It is important to point out that, you know, you're not going to get some super dramatic epic out of this, right? There's a whole reason for why I'm saying this, right? It's not, you know, this ain't Lord of the Rings, this ain't like, you know, something super cool and epic. If anything, this feels more like a slightly more fleshed out Animal Crossing game. I think that's a great comparison. This is Animal Crossing for people that want more action, right? For people that played Animal Crossing and they go, well, why can't I use the axe to kill an enemy or something like that, right? People that just wanted more action, you know, the kind of guy that doesn't consider games to be real games if you don't have combat, if you're not given a sword or a gun to run around and kill things with, you know? And hey, if that sounds fun to you, then you're gonna love this game, just like I did. It is a super bright, friendly, family-friendly, colorful world where you're given a ton of different jobs to develop and play with. Here they're called, I think, like lives or life paths or something like that, but they're basically just jobs. Most of the time, you're going to be switching from one job to the other at any given moment, since there's a bunch of quests that require you to gather up different resources or ingredients that will involve multiple jobs, right? You'll end up playing the game for a long time, just pursuing one or two goals that are kind of interconnected with a whole bunch of other tasks that will encourage you to try a little bit of everything, right? Like, before you know it, you're going to spend dozens of hours just messing around on your own without even touching the story at all, right? Which is a good thing, if you ask me, right? It's the kind of game where, you know, oh, you gotta make a sword, but, you know, what do you need for the sword? You need wood, or you need metal. Oh, okay, well, I need to be a miner to get the metal, and I gotta be a carpenter to make the wood for the hilt, and, oh, then I gotta be this guy to do this task, and oh, these are the materials that only a chef can use. Okay, well, I gotta go be a chef and do this, which will then help me with my other job. Oh, I gotta get materials that only a certain enemy can drop. Oh, well, I gotta turn into a mercenary guy and then kill those enemies, get the drop, and then cook it, and then this thing that you cook will help you portal up all of your stats for this, you know, wood carpentry thing. So they do a good job at sort of, you know, you're not just gonna stay with one job forever, right? Like, everything you do will be you switching from one thing, boom, 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 like all the time. And so it's cool. You get a taste of everything. So overall, like, if you're looking for a super chill, and I really mean like super chill game, where everything is sunshine and rainbows and things don't really get super complicated, then I do recommend this game quite a lot, actually. I really like this game, especially if you have kids. You know, I think this is a really good children's game that you can buy for them on a Nintendo Switch or something. It's certainly a lot better than all of those like super old Jimmy Neutron games that I used to get on Game Boy Advance back when there would always be like a movie licensed title game or something like that. Nowadays, I think we have better games now than like SpongeBob games or Jimmy Neutron games or stuff like that. So yeah, Fantasy Life I, if you have kids or if you just want to play it yourself, I think it's a pretty good buy. Okay, moving on to my next game of the year. Now we have Hollow Knight Silksong. Oh yeah, it's that game that everybody has been memeing about for years. It's finally out after so long. But is it any good though? Well, yes, it's a Game of the Year video and I'm talking about it. Yeah, absolutely, yes, it is. It's difficult to hype up a game for so long and have it live up to expectations, but Silksong actually delivers pretty beautifully at only $20. If you've played the previous game, then you've already played this, but now you have different mechanics due to the character that you're playing as, which is different to the mute protagonist that you have before. Now this is the other lady, so the lady that you were having boss battles with before, now she's the protagonist here. As someone that played a lot of the original Hollow Knight, I did take some getting used to the new controls, because, you know, her combat style and everything is very different. Like when you do the downwards, you know, sword swing, she doesn't actually swing the sword downwards, she kind of like dives down and stuff, and she has all of these like silk and almost like spiderwebby kind of abilities. She has like this, how do you call it, like a parachute. If you're falling down, you can kind of fall down slower. Yeah, you eventually get over it, and you learn all of these different abilities. You'll get this new, how do I say it, like a new flow. You get a new flow as you explore this new and exciting world. And as you would expect, this game is pretty hard. I'd say it's harder than the original Hollow Knight, but it's pretty satisfying when you can finally master the mechanics and see it reflected in your victory. I think that's pretty cool. I think that just goes for most super difficult games. There's also some new things in here, like your player character actually talking, as I mentioned, and having her own opinion on what's happening in the world. There's also some side quests, new rewards, new upgrades that you get over time. All of that is great, but what really blew me away, for me, was the production value for the whole thing, you know? They really outdid themselves when it came to the visuals, the animation, the voice acting, and the wonderful, wonderful music. All of that together really created a fantastic atmosphere for me. It just made me want to play more, just to see what new kinds of environments and levels I could find. But yeah, I mean, it's awesome, and I think everybody knows that already, right? What else can I say about Silksong that hasn't been said a billion times already? People have talked so much about Silksong that now they're kind of looping back around to saying, what, $20? That's too little, it should be $40, which is crazy. People saying that it's bad that the game is $20 and that it should be higher. But hey, you know, it's a testament to how awesome Team Cherry is being to their community, charging only 20 bucks for this game. I think that's great. I'm a very simple guy. I don't really think about the business or what other developers are feeling or anything like that. I'm a very simple guy. Spending less money on something cool, that's good. That's my opinion on that. Less money spent better. It's just as much of a great game as the original is, you know, to go back to the conclusion here. It's looking like the game is probably going to be even better with all of the free DLC that they're planning for it. I know that they did announce new DLC that would expand the game further, just like the original Hollow Knight did. So I'm assuming that they're just going to keep at it on that, and they're going to make Silksong an even better game that is even better value now with the 20 bucks that you're spending on it. Yeah, it's a very difficult game not to recommend. You know, if you haven't gotten around to playing it yet, then you definitely should. And you should play the original Hollow Knight as well. That game is still relevant and good, even with Silksong being out. Alright, we are now at the halfway point with this next game of the year, called Megabonk. I feel like this is the 20th time that I say that I'm tired of seeing so many Vampire Survivor ripoff games flooding Steam, right? But every time I say that, there's always a good one of those that sticks out from the rest, right? I mean, before, it was a Picayune Dreams, I remember really loving that one. And then Big Rock Galactic Survivors is also really cool. And then Ball Pit came out, and then we have Megabonk, you know, a very, very fun game that came seemingly out of nowhere. And to put it in simple terms, the game is basically Vampire Survivors, but in 3D, mixed in with a little bit of Risk of Rain 2 and a lot of internet meme references. Usually I would cringe about that, but it actually works well here, because it embraces it fully, right? It fully commits to the bit. It's not like it has a normal story and then it sneaks in like an Among Us reference or whatever. No. Literally the entire game's identity revolves around a ton of internet culture stuff like GigaChat and skeletons on skateboards and furries or anything else that you could think of, because it wears all of that stuff on its sleeve, right? It avoids being embarrassing and it creates a unique charm of its own, right? And all it has to do is just own it, instead of being coy with it and sneaking memes in there. No, the whole thing is memes. The gameplay itself is also very fun, with fun weapons to use and a 3D map. I think there's around there's 3 maps now, full of things to interact with, and you can upgrade your stats with, you know, there's all these little temples and the Moai statues, and there's secret little enemies and bosses that you can reveal if you explore well enough. The enemies are also pretty unique, now that we're talking about that, and uniquely named. There's a lot of really funny boss names that you'll find in here. All of that is accompanied by a surprisingly good soundtrack as well, and good visual presentation. I mean, the graphics are not, you know, Death Stranding 2 level, but it works, and I like the way that this game looks. And similar to Risk of Rain, it does that thing where you have to find the portal, summon the boss, and then go into the portal after you kill the boss. Then you have to make sure that you don't stay in one place for too long, because then the difficulty starts to get really high. But now you have that added Vampire Survivors element of it, right? Where you have the automatic attacks, you level up, and then you upgrade one of your weapons. You keep kind of building off of that, while giant swarms of enemies are coming to get you. Every time you die, of course, you unlock new items, new characters, new upgrades, and a whole bunch of stuff. You know the drill, right? If you've played a Survivors game, all of them pretty much play the same. I mean, I say that, but then cut the camera, you know, to me spending the hours and hours playing this until the sun comes down, right? I mean, I still love Vampire Survivors. I think when I think about all of these Survivor games, I do still think that Vampire Survivors is the better game at the end of the day, and that's the one that I would prefer to play if I could only choose one. But I think this game, Megabonk, still has its own unique appeal that makes it different from most ripoffs, right? Even if it is just a ripoff of, you know, this is just Vampire Survivors and Risk of Rain, just, you know, put on a blender, that still doesn't deny the fact that I still spend an ungodly amount of time playing this. You'll probably do the same as well if you decide to buy this, which You should, you know, it's really good. And, you know, the developer is this mysterious person who might be a YouTuber, might not be. But they take feedback very, very well. You know, a lot of comments that he receives from people as suggestions to put into the game, like, he implements all of those things very well. And so I can only imagine that this game is going to keep getting updated over and over and over again for a good long while, and I think it's going to generate some very fun results. So not only would I buy this game, but I would keep my eye on it to see how it grows over time. Alright, now moving on to the second half of the Game of the Year list. Next up, we have Deltarune Chapters 3 and 4. Okay, so so bear with me on this one, alright? I know it's weird to put a game that's technically already been out for years on this list, but I do really feel that these two new Deltarune chapters should be considered new significant releases that need to be given the appreciation that they deserve. Deltarune proves that Undertale was not a fluke, right? But Chapter 3 and 4 further cements Toby Fox as an absolute genius that makes the planet stop when he puts out something new, right? I want this segment to be short because I don't want to go into too much detail and spoil some honestly brilliant things that these chapters do. And all I can say is that, you know, this is exactly what you've come to expect. I mean, if you're a fan of Undertale, and if you've played the other chapters of Deltarune, you know exactly what you're gonna get. Well, I mean, I say that, but there's a bunch of stuff in here that maybe you don't expect. The story is packed to the gills with comedy. You know, just like always, it's super funny, but it also has that occasional seriousness and drama that really lets the characters shine and give them new dimensions beyond jokes. Sometimes they kind of fuse the serious stuff with the funny stuff. In fact, the beginning of Chapter 3 is very much an example of that. Gameplay-wise, Toby Fox continues to impress. And his team, you know, it's not just him anymore. He has a team of developers now. And he continues to impress with all of the very new and creative ways that it presents the combat, you know? The combat is still so much fun, with just dodging all the bullets or doing the act command and all that stuff. If you ask me what I could possibly do with just a box and a heart symbol, I don't think I'd be able to come up with anywhere near the amount of things that Undertale and Deltarune do, right? Let alone have it all flow well and be implemented in such a seamless way. Even though the graphics are simple, everything still looks pretty, you know? It's still a nice look. Even though the game still looks kind of like Undertale, it looks like it could run on a Super Nintendo, you know? And it still look relatively the same. You get some visual surprises too, you know, like the character Tenna being more of a 3D sprite character as opposed to 2D. And of course, you can't talk about anything Toby Fox related without complimenting the incredible soundtrack. As always, the music slaps, and I can't wait to listen to it on its own, which is another great deal, right? You can buy the game on Steam and it includes the soundtrack, and every time there's a new chapter, it will include all of the new songs of that chapter into the soundtrack, which is fantastic at no extra cost. So anyway, to get into more details about the story, or certain important battles, would be for me to rob you of an honestly great experience. I know this game is technically an older title, you know, the first chapter came out years ago, but if I can be super technical about it, technically, you know, nerd emoji with my finger pointed out, technically the official paid release of Deltarune, with all 4 chapters, never really got released until this year. The first 2 chapters were more akin to a free demo, right? Like, the first chapter was released on Toby Fox's, I think on, like, Undertale's website. There was a website that everybody went to on Halloween when that came out, and then there was, like, this secret free demo for a thing, and then the second chapter was released for free, and then on consoles like Nintendo Switch, it was released as kind of like a free demo kind of thing, so it was never really the full, legitimate release of Deltarune, you know what I mean? So now in 2025, this is actually the first time that Deltarune got released with all of the content so far with a price tag on official storefronts. So I am going to be a weaselly little cheater here and say that I am counting all 4 chapters of Deltarune so far as a 2025 release that I am including on my Game of the Year list. There you go, it's my list, I can do whatever I want with it, and that's my, you know, my little loophole that I'm going to roll with. Moving on to my next Game of the Year, it is The Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky First Chapter, the remake to be precise. So I think the official title for this game is just Trails in the Sky First Chapter, but you know, it's a Legend of Heroes game. So, I have a lot to say about this one. I can make a whole video on this game, but hey, I'll try to be brief. So, to give you a little bit of context, last year, I was severely disappointed with all of the remakes that I was looking forward to. I mean, I was disappointed at the Dragon Quest III remake. And by the way, I was also not super impressed by the 1 and 2 remake, and it looks like Square Enix is continuing the losing streak by trying to ruin yet another great game by making it look worse and removing everything that made that game interesting in the first place, but hey, we'll see. We'll wait and see in February to see if that Dragon Quest VII remake is any good. I have a bad feeling about it, but we'll see. But yeah, that Dragon Quest III remake wasn't great in my opinion. I was also pretty irritated at the Persona 3 remake, and I was left with steam blasting out of my ears playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Needless to say, I was left incredibly cynical when it comes to remaking games I loved. When I heard that Trails in the Sky was getting remade, another super popular, cool JRPG that I really loved is getting a remake, I was obviously excited, but you know, I was very cautious that this could be yet another failure that people will love anyway because pretty graphics. But after spending a lot of time with it, I am very, and I mean very happy to tell you guys that I liked this game a lot. It's the best that any Trails game has ever looked, sounded, and played. And it does a good job at preserving the content of the original while still adding more stuff, and a lot of holdovers from the more recent Legend of Heroes titles that kind of get, I don't want to say backported to the original game, because it's not the original game, it's a remake of the original. But it does feel weird to have more modern-day mechanics kind of added to this older game. But yeah, you know, a lot of stuff from Trails Through Daybreak is in this game, which means, yes, there is a little bit of action-based combat in here, but it doesn't totally replace the turn-based combat at all. And thank God for that, because the action combat, it doesn't really exist to replace turn-based. It's more of a small, convenient thing that you can do to get rid of weaker enemies in a faster way and save you some time. But as I said, it's pretty much impossible to beat the game without engaging with the much, much better turn-based combat system. In fact, there's a lot of boss battles that don't even give you the chance to do action-based. It'll just immediately send you to turn-based. Which, you know, it retains, this turn-based system retains all of the changes and improvements that all of the previous games have had. So, you know, this is all 3D rendered, so, you know, you can move around, and whenever you have AoE attacks, you can adjust your positioning to make sure you hit everybody. A lot of those things are implemented in here. And then you have stuff like the overdrive system from the Cold Steel games. I mean, if you've played these games, you'll know. And so when you're busy not fighting, you'll be busy taking in the beauty of this world, finally realized in 3D. I mean, it looks awesome, and I got a little emotional seeing those 2D sprites finally achieve their full potential, you know? If Maximilian Dude was getting teary-eyed at Final Fantasy VII Remake, I mean, this game is what that was for Max, right? I was doing the same for this game. Everything from the people to the environments, the enemies, the magic spells, I mean, it all looked great. The Japanese voice acting is super on point, the music is still awesome, even the camera angles that they use for a lot of the little cutscenes and special attacks and stuff, all of that seems very carefully done, right? It doesn't seem like a slapped-together 3D game. It seems like a lot of the stuff that they do, especially with the camera, is very intentional. And yeah, the addition of these cinematic cutscenes at the beginning and in a lot of important story moments, it just makes everything so much more fun to consume. I will admit that I haven't beaten the game yet, but that's only because I've already spent dozens of hours just taking my time, you know? It's one of those games where I just don't want to rush things. I did it all at my own pace. In addition to all of the new content that they added, I also, you know, like just going around, exploring, seeing all of those 2D things and 3D and talking to everybody and make sure that I see what all of my favorite characters have to say. And when time moves forward, all the dialogue changes, so you gotta go around and talk to everybody again for a lot of really cool flavor text. So yeah, I mean, despite how pretty everything looks, none of it really means anything without the people that live in that world that make you care, right? So, you know, characters like Estelle, Joshua, Cassius, Tita, Sherazard, Agit, and everyone else are the reason these games are so good, for the most part. The characters and their banter is as wonderful as it was on the PSP, even though the translation here is clearly different from the original. This English version is actually much more faithful to the original Japanese text, which might leave some people thinking that the dialogue is a bit too literal or a little too dry, but I'm going to give you my personal opinion. I much prefer this as opposed to what other localizers might do, where they feel the temptation of adding memes and pop culture references and political commentary, or sanitizing the delivery of the dialogue, or sometimes changing a relatively normal, respectful character and changing their dialogue to be more like sarcastic and aggressive, maybe add a few insults in there that didn't exist before, just like little things that are super unnecessary, you know, localization changes and creative liberties that these games don't really need so that they can be good, right? I would argue that no game needs it, in fact, but that's a whole other discussion. Of course, I mean, there are things that I could criticize the game for, right? Like how the character expressions are nowhere near as good as the original, or how the art style of the original is still much better and unique than the super generic, you know, moe anime art style that looks like any other anime in the world, or that the action combat isn't really all that useful. You know, sometimes there are parts where I feel like the game is probably better off without the action combat, or how the English voice acting really doesn't hold a candle to the Japanese voices. I mean, when it comes to The Legend of Heroes, the English dub has never really been that bad at all. It's actually quite decent. But man, I mean, the Japanese voices just knock it out of the park, you know, and that's what I go for just by default. And so all of that is things that I could criticize the game for, but it's simply not enough for me not to recommend this game, right? All of those criticisms are just tiny, tiny, tiny little things in comparison to just the wonderful time that I have overall. This really is one of those remakes that just makes sense to me, right? Trolls in the Sky is an incredible game. It's excellent. It's a remake of such a fantastic game that actually deserves this level of treatment. And my compliments to Falcom, you know, for getting so much of it right. You know, in an era where seemingly no one knows how to properly remake games without ruining what made these games deserving of a remake to begin with, right? They take away what's good, and then they say that this is better, and, you know. With that said, I don't think anyone should ignore the original game. You know, I'm here gassing up the remake, but don't go into this thinking, oh, so the original PSP game just doesn't matter anymore. No. The original game is still awesome, right? And this new one also exists, and, you know, both are awesome. I highly recommend you check out the original Trolls in the Sky if you can, but this remake is also a pretty fantastic entry point into an already fantastic world that you're not going to regret losing yourself in. Alright, we're almost done. Just 2 more games left. The next game of the year is Hades 2. So this could have been on my list last year, but I held back because it was an early access, and I knew Supergiant Games were right around the corner for a full 1.0 release, right? That was coming soon, so I said, I'm gonna hold back, and when the full game comes out, then we'll talk. And so I am really glad that I waited, for real, because it really made a big difference, and I love the game even more now. Hades 2 is absolutely wonderful. I mean, it's about as wonderful as Hades 1, honestly. If you've played the first game, then you know exactly how this sequel works, but now there's different weapons, there's new characters, more story, an enormous amount of dialogue, and a whole other Hades game within the one that already exists, right? I say that because you're there in the underworld doing your stuff and, you know, trying to kill time and all that, but then eventually they add Olympus to the game, which is up on the surface, and so you can fight on the surface now. And don't think that this is like a palette swap or like a hard mode or New Game Plus or anything like that. This is a totally different set of levels. They're all unique with different bosses, different resources to collect and goals to achieve. You know, you're gonna do some spell there with the witches, and sometimes there's a resource that you can only get on the surface or you can only get in the underworld. And so, you know, you can wait until you beat the game, quote unquote, underground, and then go up later. Or you can do what I do, which, you know, the surface and the underworld kind of take turns, right? I do one playthrough down here, and then do another playthrough up there, and I kind of just go back and forth, boom, 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 like that, right? And so I have double the game all the time, and it's very rewarding for both, you know, gameplay reasons and story reasons, seeing all of that all at once. It's very fun. And just like with Hades 1, I started playing it, and I found it extremely hard to not say, ooh, just one more. Oh, I want to use this upgrade, I want to use this weapon, oh man, I'm going to do the Pact of Punishment, and I'm going to use this, oh, okay. You know, I just get really excited, and I start planning out my next playthrough the instant I lose and I start over again, right? I just get super engrossed, and I think out of all of the games on this list, I'm pretty sure Hades 2 is the game that I both played and enjoyed the most. In terms of time, I put in a lot of time into Hades 2. I also enjoyed seeing the game grow through early access, you know, seeing it in its early stages and then kind of enjoying all the new stuff that came out with every update. it always brought me back to play more. And so now seeing it in the full 1.0 version, I'm thinking, oh, what if I just start the game all the way from the beginning? What if I start a new game with all of these new things that they added, right? And you can tell the difference, you know, you can notice a bunch of little details that weren't there before. This is usually the part where I say, oh, but wait a minute, guys, this game is not perfect. There are some criticisms. And then I force myself to nitpick about the game so that my perspective comes across as more fair and balanced. But I'll be honest, I have a really difficult time thinking of anything to criticize the game over. I mean, for what it wants to be, it's damn near perfect. I mean, shit. I mean, maybe I can reach and say that maybe it's a little tedious to have to beat the game a ton of times just to get little tiny tidbits of the story at a time, which is the same thing the Hades one did, but considering how powerful you eventually become after a certain point, beating the bosses becomes less and less of a problem, and it becomes less of a roguelike and more of like a speedrunning game, where it's like, alright, now I can annihilate everybody, and let's see how fast I can do it, right? So even that thing that could be a criticism, it ends up not being a criticism because it just leads in for you to do other more fun stuff, so I don't know. I guess the game is just that good and I can't find much to complain about, you know? And if that's not a shining endorsement on the game's quality, I really don't know what is, you know? Supergiant Games have yet to release a bad game, in my opinion, and Hades 2 is no exception, so, you know, go play it. You won't regret it. And Hades 1 as well. Hades 1 is still, like, super legit and still super fun, so, you know, I think both games, if you buy them together, still cost less than a normal AAA game now, right? So why not buy both? Go ahead, buy both, have a good time. Okay, here we are at the end. The last game I want to talk about for Game of the Year is the obvious one that everyone and their mother has been talking about. Of course, I'm talking about Clair Obscur Expedition 33. People have adored this game so much that people's opinions have looped back around to being negative and calling the game overrated and not that great, which is normal. I mean, to me, that's kind of a good sign, you know, because that's exactly what happens to Undertale and Baldur's Gate 3 and many other hyper-successful games. People said this about Minecraft, you know. Every super big game always has the 3 acts, right? The 3 acts of popular game opinions, which goes like this. Act 1 is always like innocent curiosity about a game's success. I was like, oh, this seems kind of cool. I want to know more. Wow, it's doing really well. And then Act 2 is praising the game, right? Just sincere. Oh my god, it's so good. It's awesome, right? And, you know, you celebrate, and then you're celebrating alongside everyone else. But then comes Act 3. Act 3 is the point of fatigue, right? Where you get really sick and tired of hearing everybody talk about the same game for so long. But instead of just saying that you're tired of hearing about it, you instead say that the game is overrated and that it was never good. I don't even know why people are even talking about this game. All you crazy fanboys are so toxic. You know, the typical stuff, right? This other game that no one is talking about is just so much better. You know, they start to get into that kind of mood where like, oh, this other game that I like is so much better than the one that everyone else likes. You know, they start to get into contrary and pretentious kind of mode. This is super normal. Welcome to the internet, right? That's usually how it goes. And so with Expedition 33, that was not an exception. You know, if you're still out there wondering if this game really truly is as good as people make it out to be, I want to throw my personal opinion into the pile and say, yes, it really is that good. People love it so much that they hate it. But let's actually talk about the game for a little bit. I mean, gameplay-wise, it's kind of like a Final Fantasy-ish kind of game. It's turn-based with a little touch of, like, Mario and Luigi with some Paper Mario mechanics in there where, you know, in Paper Mario, you can also parry in that game too. And then Mario and Luigi, you can jump to avoid attacks and all that kind of stuff. It's a turn-based combat system that has quick-time events, has dodging and parrying to make things a little bit more dynamic and interesting, right? It will be a little hard to adjust to the combat system at first, but trust me when I say that when you get the hang of it, and you start to get this flow of dodging and parrying, and you know how to time things now, you are going to feel like a god just mowing down these enemies, and it'll be super satisfying to fight pretty much anyone, right? Because any enemy you fight is just practice for you to sharpening your skills for the dodging and the parrying. And for all of those little quick time events that you got going on when you do special attacks and abilities and stuff. Story-wise, it's about, you know, a bunch of French people that keep dying to the Paintress. You know, the villain that for whatever reason is able to eliminate people that grow beyond a certain age, right? So everyone that's left, that hasn't died, they gather up a group of people to go on an expedition to kill this person so that she stops killing everyone else, right? Pretty simple to understand at first, but of course, the story does start to go off into some pretty crazy directions that I'm not going to spoil here, but needless to say, all of it was super interesting to me. And the characters that you see go through this journey are also really cool too, who also have really fun and unique ways of fighting as well. If you told me that this game had a really small budget on the level of like Godzilla Minus One or whatever, because that's another really good movie that had a surprisingly small budget, that's almost like not too dissimilar to Expedition 33, I'd honestly have a hard time believing you, because like the graphics and the soundtrack are all pretty stellar. I mean, everywhere you turn is a feast for the eyes and the ears, to the point that you would assume that there's a big, large AAA studio making this, but no. It's a relatively small team with a relatively low budget, and they still managed to make an amazing game. As I said at the top of this video, this should make AAA studio executives hang their heads down in shame, instead of what they will actually do, which is just double down on everything that's making them fail right now, but I digress. I don't think you need someone like me to tell you if this is a good game or not. I mean, if you're in tune to any part of the games industry, you've heard of this game and how it won every single award under the sun, except for that one trophy that they lost for totally bullshit reasons, but that's another story. If my opinion, or all of the news surrounding it, has made you curious about Expedition 33, then I highly recommend you give it a shot, and I highly recommend that you play it in French as well. It's a really, really cool experience to play a game in a different language that's not just either English or Japanese. It's new, it's fresh, it's unique, and it's not going to cost you a fortune to play it either. This game, more than any other, is a pretty clear indicator that we, the players, are the ones that run the industry and decide what succeeds and what doesn't. Not the multi-million-dollar company, not those corporations with their boring, safe, sanitized, microtransaction-infested slop that has a higher price tag than the fucking mortgage on my house. And that's just for the base game, you know, that doesn't include season passes or anything like that. So if you hate all of that as much as I do, and you want to support good developers that set a better example of what we want in the industry, then please, go buy Expedition 33, and more importantly, enjoy it. And with that, we're done. Thank you so much, everybody, for sticking around to listen to me talk until my throat hurts about games that I really like this year. This is usually the part where I apologize for the 10 billionth time for not uploading anything to this channel, but I'm gonna be different this time and say that I'm not sorry. At all, actually. I'm not sorry for not uploading anything. I've actually been pretty damn happy being disconnected from the internet. Now granted, I'm not totally 100% disconnected, mind you. Obviously, I check in on the news, and I comment on videos sometimes and stuff like that. Like, I obviously dip my toe into the internet. I'm not totally clueless. All of the references that I make, I had to find them somewhere, right? But, you know, my internet usage is just nowhere near what it used to be a few years ago. And my life has been nothing but better for it. I can't even begin to tell you how much happier I feel, you know? In terms of updates, I haven't really done anything other than just living my life offline in peace and dedicating a big portion of my time to playing games on my own, reading manga, and drawing manga. In fact, by the time you guys watch this video, I'm probably a week or so away from uploading something new on that front. Now, don't get me wrong, I still love talking about games and making content and stuff, but I'm just more excited about other things. To put it in simple terms, all of my dreams in life have always been the same, but I'm just chasing after them a little differently now, in a way that's a bit more fulfilling, a bit more productive, healthy, and it generally doesn't involve YouTube at all. Making manga, for example, has been a great outlet for me. It's been a fantastic new venture that I find really relaxing, creatively fulfilling, and a hell of a lot of fun. I encourage all of you to either pursue manga or something artistic that's similar. I'm also getting back into making music again, which is also really exciting. So, yeah, not really much else to say other than, you know, things are going and they're going good, and I'm pretty happy right now. Before I leave, I just want to wish you all a happy new year, a happy 2026 to everybody, and I wish the best life for all of you. I'll post a new video if I feel like it, or if somebody claims that I invented Five Nights at Freddy's again, so... But yeah, anyway, take care of yourselves, and yeah, always strive to be happy. I hope all of you are doing very well right now, and that's about it for me. Bye-bye.